The Houston Texans made a grave mistake in their blowout loss to the Minnesota Vikings. Believe it or not, they refused to take Jonathan Greenard seriously. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so very much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day, all throughout the week, all throughout the season, off season, Monday through Friday. Find this show wherever you listen to podcasts, including the SiriusXM app. You can also find the show on YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku, where you can download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Today on the show, the main topic is going to be how Jonathan Greenard got 3 sacks. That was kind of what I wanted to dive in and say, how did he get these? And when I did dive in and saw all the pressures and everything as well, something horrifying started to jump out at me in what the Texans were doing. And why they were doing it is a harder question, but we'll talk through all of that. And then after that, the offensive line, in particular the interior, is sort of a difficult thing to parse out in terms of what they're good at and what they're bad at and the extremes that lie on both ends there. And a quick word about how Sam Darnold's doing, because we got to talk about the QB, right? But let's start out with the defense. So Jonathan Greenard was the focal point of this game for both teams, I think. Both teams sort of handshaked in the middle in a medieval style, like a Pirates of the Caribbean style pre-battle parlay to say, let's make this one come down to Jonathan Greenard. Why the Texans agreed to that is insane to me, but I guess we take those. So here's what I'm talking about. So Greenard was very often left on a tight end. I mean, like 6 or 7 plays in the first half before the Texans kind of wised up and figured it out, but it was kind of too late by then because the next time the Texans even got the ball, they were down 21-zip. So really, this was a game plan decision that I think a couple of these cost the Texans the game. I think this is one of the biggest factors that cost the Texans the game. Forget the penalties and all that stuff. They dug out a half of those. This was a big issue. So what I think the Texans were doing was committing to full slides. There's 2 theories, I guess. One is that the Texans were committing to full slides as a way to combat the Vikings stunt game. Brian Flores and all Belichick defenses, this is not unique to Flores. Anybody who came from the Belichick tree has a lot of reliance on a sort of stable of stunts. The tackle end exchange stunts, the 3 guys in the middle, 2 of them crash, 1 loops around. Van Ginkel's got a couple sacks on that, got one in this game. Those kinds of things. And the Texans basically resolved to have more people in the slide, best they could, to full slide. And once you're in the slide side of a protection, you're basically just building a wall, and guys can switch up all over the place as much as they want. It's like a switch release versus zone defense. The defenders don't care. Whoever comes into my area, I'll get that guy when he comes. You can do whatever you want before then. And so in an effort to counter those stunts, they commit to full slides, to 5-man slides. That leaves the tight end one-on-one with Jonathan Greenard. If that's the decision, that's insane. I'm sorry. That's a very stupid way to go about it. And the other theory is that the Vikings forced this to happen with the way that they approached their fronts. So if you want to get Jonathan Greenard one-on-one with a tight end, you put Greenard on the strong side where that tight end is, and then you run an underfront, a 4-down underfront. So a 4-down underfront, for those who don't know, just means that the nose tackle is on the strong side and the 3 technique is on the weak side. The way I like to think about it is pretend you're the 3 technique. Am I on the weak side under? Am I on the strong side over? I don't know. Positive, negative words, and that association works for me. So you show up in an underfront, and then you force that nose tackle to slant away. Or if you're in an over front, with that 3 technique over there next to Jonathan Greenard, you have that guy cross the tackle's face. Put him in like a 4-eye and you have him attack that tackle. That can force Jonathan Greenard in with a tight end or force those slides to be that way. But if you understand enough about O-line protection rules, especially in jet protection, which is the most common one you'll see in the NFL, it works in a covered, uncovered system. I've gone over this a few times. I have a whole Patreon video that explains it in great detail. So go check that out at patreon.com/LukeBrownNFL. There's no paywall on it. But the basic broad strokes is they'll call the mic. You'll see the quarterback or the center will point at somebody, and that tells you where you start counting from the left side or the right side. But whatever side you pick, you go covered, uncovered. If there's somebody to that side of you, you are covered. So if you're the tackle, there's somebody to your outside, you're covered by that guy, you're man-to-man with that guy. And then let's say there's somebody in that B gap, so there's somebody right to the gap just to the outside of that guard is covered. He's man-to-man as well, so you don't have 2 guys man-to-man. And then let's say there's nobody in that next gap, that A gap over, then the center is not covered, and the center starts the slide. So whoever the first uncovered player is starts the slide. That's how you figure it out. I'll say that again. Whoever the first uncovered player is starts the slide. So if you want to find out who has declared the mic or whatever, look at who the slide was, look at which way you have to count so that guy was the first uncovered guy. That's who starts the slide. So if you leave the tackle uncovered, he starts the slide. That's why these underfronts are like working, right? You leave that tackle uncovered, he starts the slide. Thing is, these rules are not law. Nothing is forcing the Texans from leaving this state of affairs that leaves a rookie 4th-round tight end one-on-one with Jonathan Greenard, a player they're very familiar with, and I have to imagine have plenty of respect for. But they didn't show that respect in this game. And I think about that quote you heard about with Jonathan Greenard, being asked about going up against tight ends a whole bunch and saying like, well, I guess they didn't respect me, so if anybody else wants to not respect me, I welcome it, right? Like, yeah, please keep putting me on tight ends, he said. And like, bulletin board material, I don't blame him for taking it that way. But I have to wonder if that was sort of a manipulation of the rules. But what you have to do is adjust those protections. So if you actually look at the protections page on an NFL playbook, it's ridiculous. It's a whole bunch of different versions of that rule set playing out. If you understand that system, you know what's going to happen most of the time in these jet protections that are so very often called. Understanding all of the adjustments that can go into it is the ridiculous part. So they'll have a lot of them, and they'll all have RL words for them. It'll be like Roy and Lou. It'll be like Ray and Leo. It'll be, Rise and Lice. I don't know. That probably not that one, but you'll have all these R and L words for different permutations of this. Roy will be a 3-man slide to the right, and Lou will be a 3-man slide to the left because both of those have 3 letters, right? And then, Ray and Leo will be the same thing, but with a tight end or something like that. And every team has different words for it and everything like that. But you have to understand, have all these calls memorized. So maybe a second-year QB didn't have those calls memorized. And I think a backup center, Juice Scruggs, right? Nope, I'm wrong. Oh, he's just a second-round pick that they just want to be their starter. Okay, second-year center. So second-year center, second-year quarterback. Maybe you don't have that capability installed yet, so they don't have the ability to adjust away from it. They can see that happening and go, we're in a bad protection, but I can't just say, hey, let's just make this a 4-man slide, even though the rules say nothing else. Can I not just make a Rudy call? Rudy and Lucy. There we go. Those are 4-letter words. Can I not make a Lucy call so that the tackle can help that tight end? No, I got to leave him on an island because we just don't have those levers installed to make that change. That's understandable and something that you kind of put up with younger quarterbacks, but props to Brian Flores for making that happen. I want to point out a couple other of really cool performances from the defense, as well as talk a little bit of O-line. We're going to get very into it in the trenches here today on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Some absolutely ridiculous stuff on FanDuel nowadays. For example, you can get Sam Darnold plus 2,800 to be MVP if you want to just lay down a quick buck on that. If if you want to decide that you're completely insane. Divisional odds are starting to get weird in the NFC North as well. Vikings plus 195 all of a sudden. They were plus 1,000 a month ago, plus 195 ahead of the Green Bay Packers. But they're actually really tied with the Green Bay Packers in a lot of things. And FanDuel doesn't really know what to do with the Vikings here. So if you think you know what to do, you can go grab whatever you want. Put down $5 on it. You can get $200 in bonus bets, whatever it is. That's $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. When you're done here, why don't you go check out my Patreon page? Everything on it that isn't about the Texans game specifically should be free to watch. You might have to make an account, but otherwise free to watch. So go check that out, patreon.com/LukeBrownNFL. You can get all of these tutorials, learn the Flores defense, learn pass protection, and also just some breakdowns of like Sam Darnold and Aaron Jones and some of those burning questions you might have. Plus new stuff coming out later this week, as always. So, elsewhere on the defense, I'm starting to get a sense for why this defense is working the way that it's working. And the big change that I'm noticing, I spoke a little bit about it last week, is in the way that they do quarters. The way they run quarters right now is a little different. So, and I'm talking about 6-man quarters, 4 deep, 2 under, if you will. Cody Alexander calls it hot quarters and actually did a video on a lot of the stuff I'm about to talk about. The general principle of quarters when you're the outside corner. So I'm talking about Stephon Gilmore and Shaq Griffin, and a change in their roles is particularly what I think is like the main adjustment. Plus, I think a change in their blitz rules, but I can't be sure. So for a lot of people, I get this question like 3 or 4 times every mailbag. Here is the answer best I know it to what has Flores changed from the defense that got worked really bad last year to the one this year that's got CJ Stroud putting his head in his hands. The 2 differences that I can pick out, one is in who is dropping when they simulate pressure, when they do their their hawk look, if you will, their big blitz. That's 7-8 guys on the line of scrimmage, who comes, who doesn't. And playing that game. Essentially, it seems like the way that they have called it is such that the D tackle can't be the guy that drops into coverage. That got exploited big time last year, and they're making that impossible. They're saying, hey, Harrison Phillips, you're just not going to be in coverage. That's going to make our blitzes slightly less dynamic. You're going to reward the offense for essentially banking on the fact that Harrison Phillips is going to be part of the pass rush. But in exchange for that, you don't get him in coverage, and then we're going to take that trade-off. Okay, so that's one thing. The edges are going to be the ones backing into coverage a lot more. A lot of the time, it's Van Ginkel. A lot of the time, they'll line a whole bunch of guys off, and they'll just let only the defensive linemen go, and I'm counting outside linebackers in that. And just being a little bit less wild about who is coming and who isn't. They had snaps last year where they had 2 D linemen in the coverage and 3 defensive backs blitzing. You're like, what are we doing? This is completely insane. So it kind of chilled out on that a little bit. But I still think they have a little bit of that rule, which is the rule they had last year. When the protection slides, whoever it slides towards, that's who's going to fall off into the coverage. It's just the outside guys instead of the inside guys this time. So if you've got, Patrick Jones and Andrew Van Ginkel, this is a rep that happened. Patrick Jones and Andrew Van Ginkel up on the line of scrimmage. If they turn toward Van Ginkel, he's the one that drops. If they turn toward Patrick Jones, he's the one that drops and the other one blitzes. So you're going to have one in the coverage and one blitzing no matter what. And that's a lot better than when the choice was between Harrison Phillips and Josh Metellus. They were always going to turn it toward Harrison Phillips because they knew that that was the rule, and Harrison Phillips would be in coverage, and then he'd be the one with a flat responsibility, and a running back could, go outrun him to the edge. We don't have to deal with that. Okay, so that's one change. A slight tweak to the Hawk rules that still kind of has that same dynamic of ensuring that the slide is wrong. You are always going to have a blitzer away from the slide. That's a nightmare for the offense. But sort of backing off of it a little bit, losing a little bit of the dynamicism so that you don't have crazy mismatches in coverage. You still have like Patrick Jones in coverage. It's not necessarily perfect, but it's better than, Jonathan Bullard. The second thing is in the way that they do corners. So again, talking about the outside guys and corners, I got distracted there. Outside guys and corners, Shaq Griffin, Steph Gilmore, those guys. When you are in a typical quarters call, we're talking your classic cover four deep zones, 3 under zones. The most common 2 assignments that you will get in most defenses, I should say, and some Bo Pelini guys are going to get really mad at me or something, but the most common 2 assignments that you'll get are Meg and Mod. Meg is man everywhere he goes. It's straight up man-to-man coverage. You're familiar with it. And Mod is man outside and deep. It's a very classic cover 4 zone. I want to get a deep and outside zone. It's like what you would see when you see cover 4 on Madden. When you're in Mod, you don't really worry about the flat because in most cover 4 structures, there's a flat defender underneath you. So if they run like a high-low where you got a flat in a corner or something like that, you can take the corner, your teammate takes the flat, and everything's happy. With this 6-man variation, hot corners, if you will, this Flores kind of quarters thing, very Pat Narduzzi, college-y, you have your 4 deep zones, but only 2 underneath. And they don't split the zone in half. They don't split the whole underneath of the field in half. Both of these guys, usually linebackers, are basically dropping to like just outside the hash and relating to the quarterback's eyes. Which means if the quarterback wants to complete a pass to the flat, they can still basically stare right at that linebacker to freeze him. And then right before they throw, move over to the flat and the linebacker won't be able to break in time. You'll be able to get that completion probably some yards after the catch, especially if you're able to clear out that quarters defender on top of him. Get that guy to go deep so that he can't just rally up and make the big tackle, right? So if you can pick up that blitz and the quarterback knows how to do that, you can still get production. But last year, that was catastrophic. That would happen, and you would have somebody from 20 yards deep who was the only guy between that and a touchdown, and you'd have these crazy plays. Joe Mixon absolutely wrecked us with that. The Packers killed us with that, got the Vikings to start tweaking their structure in the middle of the game, and then they could hit it over the top. All sorts of bad stuff happened. Every single team, I think, got some kind of like swing pass for an explosive. Every single team of the last 4 the Vikings played last year. So the difference is, I think, palms. I don't know if I'm using the right word for palms, and in fact, palms means different things in different systems. So don't freak out too much that I'm using that word if I'm not using it the way that you're familiar with it. Don't worry too much about knowing what palms means, but it makes it play out a little bit like cover 2. It makes those corners play a little bit shallower, and then when there is a high-low to their side, if there's a deep route and a shallow route to that sideline, they'll midpoint it. In Mod, you take the outside one and trust that there's a flat defender. But with no flat defender, you can't have them play Mod. You have to make them play palms. I'm not going to go into an entire clinic on what palms is. We don't have time for that. But basically, you have all... It's a normal quarters like instruction, like a normal Mod instruction, but with all these adjustments that can help solve specific problems that usually attack it, like this. So you end up a lot of the times in cover 2, and some defenses actually use palms as their cover 2 call. Like when they want to be too high, when they want to call cover 2 because of what concept they think they're getting, they'll actually call palms, which is a quarter call that just turns into cover 2 a lot, where the corner is going to midpoint between that flat route, play close enough to it so that if it's caught, he can rally and tackle without too bad of a gain, but also stay underneath that deep route. So if it's like a corner or something, they can fall away and make a play on the ball. Jalen Johnson actually got an interception like that on Josh Dobbs on Monday Night Football last year. You might remember it. That was in palms, which it actually looked like cover 2, but it was actually palms. He revealed later on the Richard Sherman podcast. Great example of how those two things can kind of play out the same. And that really helps to defend the flats without giving up anything over the top. And by the way, if corners are mid-pointing, then the other quarters defender on that side can kind of turn into an over-the-top half safety, and it's just literally cover 2 now. Like, it's just no difference. And that can just happen. So those sides can sort of morph on a dime, and you need experienced, smart players to do that, and that's what Gilmore and Griffin are doing really well, is positioning themselves properly, reading that out properly. Like, it takes a lot of mental experience to do that properly. You can't ask a rookie to just like chill in palms and like get it right away. It's a really hard one to execute. So excited about that. Also excited about some parts of the O-line, but not all of the parts of the O-line, and kind of same with Sam Darnold. We'll get into the offense next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by BetterHelp. Therapy is a very important part of my life. It's something that I don't think I would be able to do a work from home job without, just because of the way that like affects my mental health. And getting into therapy was kind of a tough sledding for me. I had to go through a couple of therapists that I didn't like, and I had to sort of resist the temptation to think that all therapy was like that and just kind of keep calling people until I was able to find somebody. BetterHelp is a service that is designed to help you through that process so you can find a therapist that's right for you. They're going to hook you up with somebody that they think is right for you. If you don't like them, you can change anytime at no additional cost, and it's designed to be online, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You can do it after work hours, you can do it on video call or on a phone call on your hour lunch break, or whatever you are comfortable with, whatever works best for you. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Moving to the offense here on the Locked On Vikings podcast, I want to shout out the O-line, in particular on double teams on the interior. So here's the scoop with the O-line. Darrisaw and O'Neal were exactly what you expected them to be in a given game. Darrisaw was fantastic. Brian O'Neal was pretty good, had a couple of blemishes, lost a couple reps to Danielle Hunter. We're never going to be too mad about that. But otherwise, perfectly happy with both those guys at tackle. The interior, in pass protection, big problem. And this is sort of becoming a pattern of giving up too much pressure, getting smoked a little bit too much on the inside. And the thing is, it just doesn't feel that bad because Darnold's done a really good job of erasing it. Problem is, you get Darnold under pressure and you get those weird plays like the one where he tries to flip it to Aaron Jones, and then another shovel where he flips it to Aaron Jones, and you're like, why do you keep doing that? But you also can get like scramble drill touchdowns to Justin Jefferson, We can't ask Sam Darnold to be different, which, by the way, that's really the big note I have on Sam Darnold. Same guy, same thing, did a bunch of really nice plays, a lot of good rhythm. Once we got into schoolyard mode, oh boy, really cool things can happen and really uncool things can happen. And I kind of want to keep him out of schoolyard mode as much as possible, but it's nice to know that if the play is busted, there is still sort of a Hail Mary you can throw to make that play a positive one. But mostly, we just want to keep encouraging him to play a little bit more safe, a little bit more conservative. But pass protection wise, O-line, we're just getting beat a lot. And, that we'll have to worry about that. I'll probably do a Patreon page on like the real details of that. And then you get a run play, especially a duo run play, and these guys are just warriors. Brandel in particular, I think I want to do a video on just Brandel, honestly. I think we've seen enough in its time where we should check in on him. But he's not perfect in pass pro. I think the losses by Ingram and Bradbury and other teams are attacking Ingram and Bradbury and identifying those guys as the targets. That we can sort of say, okay, Brandel, even if you do lose a couple here and there, you're not going to be the problem in pass pro. It's the center and the right guard. But in run blocking, the drive on this guy, holy Moses. Whenever you get a double that involves Brandel, whether it's with Darrisaw or with Bradbury, guys on skates. Bradbury and Ingram, guys on skates. Ingram and O'Neal, guys on skates. Josh Oliver and Johnny Munt, guys on skates. Just sledding dudes. All over the tape, it is violence and war crimes on this run tape. And for me, I'm probably wrong to do this, but it makes the pass pro issues so forgivable to me. When you just line up and hit guys in the mouth all the time, I am making a fully irrational decision by being forgiving of that, and I kind of don't care because it's just awesome. It is so awesome. And whenever there is any penetration, you still have Aaron Jones, who's been able to paper over some of those mistakes really well in past games. Didn't have to do a lot of that in this one. Had a lot of space in front of him. Could do a lot of easy chewing up 7 yards. And then when they did run a zone, and if you hit the gap, the one long one that he got, You still have that explosive ability. But of the 3 games, I think this was the one where Aaron Jones had the easiest time. He could kind of sleepwalk through this one because everyone was winning their blocks. And as a running back, you love that, right? Like nobody's going to say sorry for that. That's awesome. Good for you. But it was a thorough ass kicking on the ground. Pass pro and in the air. The Texans had some ideas. And what they wanted to do was, especially on third down, so D'Amico Ryans and Brian Flores, I think, share some DNA in their playbooks. I don't know D'Amico Ryans' coaching tree off the top of my head. I mean, I know he was with the Texans way back when in like the Vrabel days, I believe. And I think he worked with Belichick a little bit, so it wouldn't super surprise me. But they were kind of doing the same thing where they took all of their D linemen off the field on third downs, and it was like all edge rushers. All their interior D linemen. So it was like, Hunter, Will Anderson, they had Jerry Hughes and like whoever else, like all edge rushers. And they lined up Will Anderson on Ingram and they lined up Danielle Hunter on Bradbury. Lining up Danielle Hunter on Bradbury is pretty funny. Like those two guys know each other, like that feels a little bit like Danielle Hunter was in the meeting room going, okay, 55, who do you want? And he goes, I want the center. So it's a little bit like picking him and then, putting Will Anderson on Ed Ingram, forcing those guys into one-on-ones and then hoping you can win. And the Texans got a lot of success doing stuff like that. Just getting guys one-on-one and isolated there. So I would go so far as to say the pass pro is a concern. It is less of a concern than I think we're used to it being because Sam Darnold has a little bit of pressure erasing in him. But some of that pressure erasing also comes with some total catastrophe potential. So it's a little bit spooky anyways. But man, you gotta just, if you have NFL Plus and you can, just turn on some of these duo run plays. Find the double teams and just watch guys get blown the heck back. That D-line film room in Houston on Monday, I don't know how fun that would be. You say, good job getting a pressure. You're an edge rusher and you beat a guard one-on-one. That's kind of a mismatch you should win. But holy crap. And in dealing with Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter on the outside, especially when you ran up the middle, which is kind of what I suggested, when you ran up the middle, you had to trust O'Neal and Darisaw, at least one of them each rep one-on-one. And sometimes, like, there is a duo run that got like 7-8 yards that had Johnny Munt one-on-one with Danielle Hunter, and he won the rep. Like, it's just your day sometimes. So the run game tape continues to astound me and look a little better than it was, but I really think the difference between this year and last year is a testament to running backs mattering. I really do. That's just like my subjective thing off watching the tape that Aaron Jones and this version of Ty Chandler are just taking advantage of holes better than last year's Ty Chandler and Alexander Madison could and Cam Akers. I think the run blocking with Brandel has been awesome. That is not to be overlooked either, but running the ball up the middle is just going to be there all year, I think. And boy, does that make a lot of stuff easier. That's really good stuff. We got Packers week now. It's hate week. Peter Bukowski, crossover Thursday tomorrow. That should be pretty fun. I will see you all for that. And as always, Skull.